Alright, so I've been getting a couple of requests to understand how to actually fly the Concorde. So I decided I might as well clarify the main important steps as to how to fly it and give you a good tour of like the controls, mainly the auto flight control system, AFCS. I know it can look a little daunting initially. However, you'll soon find out it's no different to any other aircraft, really. So I'm in the Concorde at gate 421 and we're going to fly to New York. So I'm going to initialize the Concorde, get the other pilots to start doing their cockpit flows, and then I'll give you an explanation of the autopilot and the type of modes that need to be used. So first we'll load the route. I would highly recommend getting this add-on in particular, the FS Labs one. Very authentic. Okay, so I'm going to change my runway to runway 27 left. And then recalculate it. So we're departing off runway 27 left, okay. You can print the data, it'll open up over here. And file the takeoff data. Trim 2.5 for takeoff, corresponding to a center of gravity of 53.5. And we'll bug the instruments, like that. Okay, that's it. So now I will get the cockpit flows going and we'll go through the autopilot together.
Right, that's the walk around complete. I'll press on with my cockpit prep.
Okay, I'll start my flows here and let you know when I'm ready.
And then right click to start the refueling. Alright, so to help the flight engineer a little bit get started, let me do a couple of overhead panel duties. I mean, technically it's the flight engineers, but there's no harm. So I'll turn the nav lights on. As such, engine flight rating goes to climb. Throttle masters I'll set to main, so on. Auto ignition can stay off for the moment, and engine rating mode should be at takeoff. Auto throttles should go on, like that. And yeah, I'll let the flight engineer do the other stuff. Come down over here, put the flight control inverters on. You can test the fail lights. Put these in green for now. And the anti-stall systems are on. You can check and recall the master warning. That all looks good. So now, the main part, the autopilot. So, there's not actually much to do in terms of the cockpit flows for the captain anyway. So we'll test the master, the warning and lights, test the terrain.
Light flow. All hot. All hot.
Can't test the altimeter until it's aligned. Can test the radio altimeter. Can test the HSI. And yeah, we can test this also. Coming down here, we'll set the placard to 4. The number of reheats we're going to use on takeoff. Can test the takeoff monitor. It's all okay. Can test the nose wheel steering if we wanted to. Reset it. Test the anti-skid. test the flight control position indicator and the throttle warnings. Coming down here, we can test the ADF. The air data computers go on. That's all okay. Can test the lights.
Cabin crew, this is the flight engineer. Testing the emergency evacuation system now.
So, put all that out of the way. We'll come down here and test the air data computers. You'll hear the stall and the overspeed warning at the same time. There we go. So okay, can test the gear horn warning test. And we'll come down here and finally test the lights. We'll move this down to test. Whoops. Like that. And if you were to... It's a bit difficult. There we go. You can see the lights. Now, to the autopilot. So, what we've got here is... There's a couple of ways to control Concorde, okay? The first and most obvious way that I'm going to cover is manual control over here, using the stick. Now don't be afraid to use manual control. In fact, Concorde, being a rather stable aircraft in overall, with the delta wing, it's quite a stable aircraft, so you can do the takeoff manually. I mean, it is expected of you to do the takeoff manually anyway, but you can also do the Mach 1 also manually, the point where you go to Mach 1. In fact, even at supersonic cruise, you can take a dab hand at the controls. Of course, because you have auto feel engaged, artificial feel, sorry, that will mean that the controls will tighten up. So if you try to fly this at Mach 2, very little inputs are required at that stage. So, we come down over here to the autopilot, the AFCS. The first thing you'll notice, most likely, is there are two heading selects, which might initially throw people off. However, it all makes sense when you realize there are two autopilots. So if you engage autopilot 1 and you use track heading, it'll listen to the track heading from this side. However, if you engage autopilot 2, it'll use this item, the heading select from this side. So I hope that makes it clear. So we got our modes. So we got RAD or INS. So when we take off, we follow radio navigation, and later on we switch to INS. So this changes the mode of the HSI. What I'll do is I'll reduce the sounds a little bit. I'll just reduce the sound so I don't get distracted. Alright, that should be okay. So, what else have we got? So, RAD INS. So if you change this to INS, the HSI changes to the INS position. When you are landing and taking off, it's important this is switched back to radio navigation. These over here are the instrument transfer switches. The one you will find the most useful is the third one over here. So if you switch this, whatever is on the FO side in terms of VOR navigation and anything else really is on your side, and that is especially useful when flying the standard international departure, as we'll come to later. everything else. So now we have the next confusion factor in this cockpit. Why are there two IAS hold options? And the reason for that is the one next to the altitude. These two over here. These are the vertical navigation profile modes. So you have vertical speed. If you were to select vertical speed as your mode, the default value is 800 feet per minute. And how do you know it's 800 feet per minute? Because this over here, this little metal reference indicator, will go down or up to 800 feet per minute. You adjust that by this item over here, nose up or nose down. Now,
I think that's me all done. How are you getting on back there?
Stand by, I'll need a few more minutes before we're ready for start.
cancel that. So, this over here, this autopilot datum, the one on the right hand side, has two functions. When vertical speed mode is selected, using this changes your vertical speed. You will see this little metal reference thingy go up and down, and that will command a steeper or shallower vertical speed. If you are using pitch hold, which is over here, which is the preferred mode of option for many cases, there will be another metal line over here. Not this one, this is the pitch index. There will be another one that will move up and down when you change, when you adjust this. So it serves two purposes, that one. Now we've got the auto throttle. We've got IAS hold over here. This is the preferred mode of option for most of the flight. So after you take off and you are ready to accelerate through 250 knots and you want to accelerate to the VMO at that point, which is about 390 knots, and climb to 26,000 feet, you want to be using IAS hold, not vertical speed or anything else like that. So what you would do is you would take off, engage the autopilot. When you engage the autopilot, by default pitch hold and heading hold will illuminate and will be your default modes. So if, say, I was climbing at a pitch angle of 20 degrees and I engage the autopilot, it will maintain 20 degrees of pitch unless I alter that pitch angle by using the autopilot datum down here. So when you're on pitch hold, you adjust your pitch angle by using this. Okay? That's how you can get to a faster or slower speed. You chase that speed, VMO. Now, once you attain that speed of 390 knots, you select IAS hold. IAS hold is a way of controlling your pitch to maintain speed, and thrust is at full power in this case. Okay, the auto throttle will not touch the thrust levers when you do IAS hold, and that is the best way of doing it. Actually, I don't particularly use vertical speed, and I'll tell you why. When you select vertical speed, the aircraft will only pitch to that vertical speed. Now, if you chose a very unrealistic vertical speed like 3,000 or maybe even 6,000 feet per minute, how do you know the aircraft will even be able to manage your airspeed at whatever value you want? On the other hand, if you select a very slow vertical speed, you're not really maximizing your aircraft's performance, are you? So when you're on vertical speed, your only other option to control your airspeed is to have an auto throttle on and use one of these three auto throttle modes. However, if you first attain your desired speed using pitch hold and then select IAS hold, the aircraft will then pitch up and down as required to maintain your IAS. without having to even touch the throttles. And that's the best way to maximize your performance on this aircraft. The throttles will be at full power anyway, so it makes sense to use IAS hold. Now this speed select knob is only useful if you are using IAS hold or IAS acquire, or even, yeah. Okay, so this at the moment is only for reference. It won't do anything unless you have one of the auto throttle IAS hold modes enabled. So I just set it to 250 as a reference to remind me that I've got to maintain 250 knots below 10,000 feet. So, how do we actually go about this? The preferred way of doing this is to first select your vertical navigation mode, such as IAS hold. Then select altitude acquire after you've selected IAS hold. And then, only then, engage the auto throttles. The auto throttles will not do anything. However, once you reach your altitude, it'll then, when the aircraft levels off, then the auto throttles kick in into IAS hold. And the reason for that is, imagine that we're climbing to 26,000 feet. Okay, so I've reached 390 knots using pitch hold. I've chased 390 knots. I engage pitch hold. I use the autopilot datum to pitch down, and then as the aircraft got speed, I selected IAS hold over here. So the aircraft then pitched up to maintain IAS, the specific IAS. Then you select altitude acquire. This is basically like altitude select or altitude arm, like on other aircraft. So when the aircraft reaches about 1,000 feet within this altitude, the aircraft captures the altitude. IAS hold or whatever other vertical mode you have extinguishes, and only altitude acquire stays active. The aircraft will then pitch down and gently capture 26,000 feet. But since that mode, that degree of freedom of burning airspeed, excess airspeed, by pitching is gone, your aircraft will naturally start to go beyond 390 knots. And that is the reason, and that's when the auto throttles kick in and engage into IAS hold auto throttle. So this, you can view this auto throttle as your safety net. So the procedure is, I repeat again, select IAS hold, then select altitude acquire, and then arm your auto throttles so that they take over when you level off at 26,000 feet. When you're at subsonic speeds, you engage both auto throttles. That's the preferred method. However, when you are at supersonic speeds, so once you pass to Mach 1.7, you only engage one auto throttle. The auto throttle system is computed to take the aircraft to Mach 2.02 and then back to Mach 2. So at that point you would engage auto throttle 1, flight director 1 and autopilot 1 if you are flying from the captain's side. If you are flying from the first officer's side, you would select autopilot 2, auto throttle 2 and flight director 2. Do not mix autopilots and auto throttles and flight directors. Do not mix them. So, I think that is pretty much all you need to know about the auto flight control system. Now you might ask, why do I have IAS acquire? What is that? So IAS acquire is a mode, an auto throttle mode. that can be used when you have vertical speed mode engaged. So say I'm trying to descend. I'm coming to land. So I have altitude acquire.
Check's complete
Okay,
here.
that's
Ready
nice.
when you guys are.
I've got altitude acquire. So I would select altitude acquire. Vertical speed by default selects 800 feet per minute, which I can adjust using the autopilot datum. Now to maintain that speed, I would use IAS acquire. So IAS acquire basically is only used during the final stages of flight, when you're approaching, say, at 190 knots, or you're finally coming to land at VREF. So let me then finally adjust the values over here for the SID. So I'm going to use Crompton 3G, CPC 3G. So that means that we are going to depart from runway 27 left. We're going to intercept the 258 radial from London VOR, and that VOR has a frequency of 113.60. So let's put that over here in nav 1. Then we are going to intercept the 258 radial, so we'll set this to 258. Like so. So we're going to intercept the 258 radial at London 113.60. After we intercept that, we are then going to turn to a heading of 271 degrees and fly to Woodley. Which is an NDB. So that has a ADF value of 352, which has been set on both ADF1 and ADF2, which is down over here. So when you're flying directly towards the Woodley NDB, both of these arrows should point northwards. So if it points slightly left, you would adjust your heading and go slightly left, and so on. It's not as precise as a VOR. Then once we reach Woodley, we're going to turn towards a course of 282 and fly directly to Crompton VOR. So 282, I'll set the heading also to 282, there's no point in setting it to 271. And that is this arrow over here. And we're going to fly to Crompton, which is 114.35. So that's our AFCS set. And then finally, our altitude at Crompton is meant to be 6,000 feet. But assuming that we get cleared to 26,000 feet shortly thereafter, I'm going to set it to 26,000 feet from now itself. Another important thing to note is, now that this is set, notice when I switch this instrument transfer, the third one, the HSI from the first officer side, which is showing the second part of flying the SID from Woodley to Crompton, shows on my side. And that is a very convenient method, because otherwise I would have to, after I cross Woodley, I would have to, as I'm flying the plane, adjust the VOR from 113.60 to 114.35 and change the course over here and change the heading also, which is very inconvenient because you got your hands full. So with the switch of one button, the right hand side information comes to the left hand side. And that is a very handy method. So keep that in mind. Another thing over here is the course deviation indicator, the HSI, you got your ground speed, okay? And that can be verified using the INS as well by changing it to GS, track/GS, which is 0 at the moment, because we're stationary. However, the miles on the right hand side over here shows you the distance to the next waypoint that is programmed in the INS. Do not get confused by thinking it is the next waypoint. It's the distance to the VOR set over here. Even if your rad INS is set to radio, it'll still give you the distance to the next waypoint in your INS. So when we have to turn at London 7 DME to a heading of 271, you have to turn, you have to look here at DME 1. This here will show you the distance from the London VOR. And when this reaches 7, we make the turn. Not when this over here reaches 7. This is the distance to your next waypoint, programmed in the INS. Similarly, DME2 shows you the distance to the VOR that has been set on the first officer's side. Another interesting thing is that we can use the miles to find out when we have reached Woodley NDB, because Woodley is programmed into the INS over here. So if we go to the flight plan, you will see that Woodley is the first waypoint, north 51272, west 0052.7. So when we reach Woodley, we then turn to 282. So you will know that you reach Woodley when the miles over here goes down to 0, and also the ADF then should flip direction because you've gone past Woodley. Alright, so I think that is pretty much a comprehensive tour of the aircraft. You might wonder, what is this other one over here? This one says auto throttle. Now this one is basically to adjust your speed. So if you're on, I think, I've never actually used this one, so I don't fully know. This is your turn knob. Like on the DC-9 you have turn knob and that kind of stuff. So yeah, this one is somehow to adjust your speed. So maybe when you've got IAS hold auto throttle engaged, you can adjust it ever so slightly, tweak it with this one. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. A comprehensive tour of all you need to know when you're flying the aircraft. Now, one last thing I'm not yet covered is the rest of the modes. So let's quickly go through that. INS means that the aircraft will follow the INS selected navigation route. So when you select INS here and you're ready to follow it, be sure to switch your RAD INS HSI modes to INS. Okay, that's a pretty simple one. VOR lock, that's when you're doing your landing, you've intercepted the localizer and then you go to VOR lock. Always engage this. From experience, I tell you, engage this some time beforehand. Keep it armed, okay? Because it does not lock on as fast as you would hope it would. And Concorde does actually approach quite fast, so time is of the essence. Heading hold, pretty much explanatory, holds the selective heading track. It turns and achieves the heading, whatever selected over here. If you selected Autopilot 1, or if you're flying from the FO side, and it'll listen to whatever's over here on Autopilot 2. Turb is turbulence, means that if the aircraft is experiencing severe turbulence, selecting this mode means the aircraft will respond less aggressively. You know, like go with the flow instead of trying to fight it. So it improves passenger comfort. Pitch hold we've already talked about. Mach hold also is another vertical profile mode, like IAS hold. Typically you'd use that at high altitudes. However, for the London to New York route, you'd use IAS hold. So first you'd use IAS hold at 390 knots, your VMO at 26,000 feet, and then after that doing descent as well. Vertical speed you would most likely use towards the final end of flight when you're descending following the standard terminal arrival route. Altitude hold, another explanatory mode, means whatever altitude you are at. If you press altitude hold, the aircraft will quickly stop climbing or descending and maintain that speed. And that is why you must have your auto throttles armed as your safety net. So when, say you were climbing at IAS hold at full power on the throttles to 26,000 feet, and suddenly ATC asked you to hold at 13,000 feet. So you would hit altitude hold, so the aircraft will stop climbing. So to control the speed, then the auto throttle will kick in into auto throttle IAS hold and will start reducing power on the throttles to maintain that specific speed. If you didn't have those armed, as soon as your plane levels off, you're going to start rapidly increasing in speed, because that method of burning off excess speed in pitch is gone. Alright. Then your max climb. This is the mode that you would use when you are supersonic. So after you've reached Mach 1.03, you would engage max climb mode. Same like your vertical speed and profile modes, select your vertical profile mode first and then altitude acquire. If you were to select altitude acquire first, vertical speed mode by default engages, and that is not desirable at that stage. Now, max cruise is not a button, it's just an indicator. You have your thrust rating modes over here: takeoff, climb, and cruise. So at somewhere between the corner point of 530 knots to Mach 2, the flight engineer will come over here to the overhead panel and will select the flight rating from climb. It'll set the engine flight rating will be from takeoff to climb pretty much after takeoff, but the flight rating will be set from climb to cruise, like that. And shortly after that, the max cruise button will illuminate alongside the max climb button, and that is the most efficient way to burn off fuel and then climb higher. Then what other modes do we have? We have glide mode. Now glide mode is like ILS mode on many aircraft. Think of glide as in glide slope. Land mode is your auto land. Now you have two different land modes. You have land 2 and you have land 3 as shown over here. Provided you have land engaged, one autopilot engaged, at least one auto throttle engaged, you are making use of land 2. If for some reason you need land 3, you need even more precision, you would have to come here to the flight engineer side. Over here. You'd have to come over here, and the batteries will be on, but you have to put them one more higher to ESS manual split, both of them. Then, I'm not too sure about this, but you have to check that your yellow hydraulic quantity is okay, or even turn them on. I'm not entirely sure about that part. I'll have to check. But once you've done that, you would have to have both autopilots on, not just one. You'd have to have both on. You'd have to have at least one auto throttle on, or preferably have both on anyway. It's preferable to have both on for subsonic speeds. And as a minimum, you need to have one flight director on as well. And in addition to that, the fourth and final clause, both your ILS approach frequency must be the same on both sides, the course must be the same on both sides, and the heading also must be the same on both sides. Then you can avail of land 3. Okay, so I think that's pretty much all you need to know about the Concorde's auto-flight control system. And I hope that helped, and in the next couple of videos we'll go through it actually hands-on. I decided to make a video first and talk about it, because when you're in the air, things happen so fast in the Concorde, you don't actually have the time to detail and explain everything. So I hope you found that useful, and stay tuned for the next couple of series. See you then.